So as I mentioned as we began this evening, we love summer services because members of our community are able to share their own voices. And the way that I look at it is that each one of us has our own interpretations of Torah to share, which Elisheva certainly has. Each one of us also has our own Torah, the Torah that comes from our hearts, the stories that we have collected, the journey that we have traversed as we have shared time together on this earth. And Elisheva, this evening, I'm honored that you will share your personal story along with your Torah this evening. So Elisheva, we were just counting. I remember the August day that you came to our community searching for a new home 7 summers ago. Is that right? And has since become a very active member of our community, including becoming adult bat mitzvah a year ago. Yes. So thank you for sharing your Torah with us this evening. Let's make sure you are on.
Yep.
Say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Great.
Okay. All right. As we wrap up this Pride Month, 2025 has proven to be an extremely challenging year for everyone, especially for those of us who are in marginalized communities. I absolutely love the fact that the clergy here at TBE graciously allow congregants to share the bima with us and for us to discuss Torah. Not all congregations will do that. I would like to thank Rabbi Sapphire for her kind and thoughtful assistance in writing this devar. Parshat Korach comes from Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, chapters 16 through 18. Bamidbar means in the wilderness. It is in this parshat that we read the narrative of Korach and his followers rebelling against Moshe and God, with God having the earth swallow them up as punishment. I'm going to use the themes of rebellion and the wilderness as my starting points for this devar. I'm going to segue frequently between retelling the narrative of my life experiences and the more scholarly discussion of the text. Not everybody is aware of this, but I grew up evangelical with 12 years of Christian schools and attending evangelical churches my entire life until I began my journey into Judaism. The LGBTQ plus community was condemned. The LGBT community was condemned. Members of that community was considered in rebellion by the church. I started playing with some of my older sister's clothes off and on until I was too big, because she's about yay tall. Even as I continued privately wearing women's clothing, I would still feel the guilt that society and the evangelical place on you. I wound up getting married twice, hiding who I was, especially from myself, which placed strain on my relationships. After having a nervous breakdown from the domestic violence that my second wife subjected me to, I wound up in the hospital where I began to really examine myself and who I truly was. Being open as a trans woman has definitely helped me have healthier and more honest relationships. After getting out of the hospital, I still tried attending evangelical churches and even a Messianic synagogue. But there I encountered bigoted and closed-minded leaders. So I started attending a Reformed synagogue in Richmond, Virginia, where I eventually began the process of conversion. It was during that process that I found out from a cousin that my paternal great-grandparents were Judeo-Swedes. Who knew? You can see it took me wandering in the wilderness and perhaps rebelling against the self that I was conditioned to believe I should be to find my way. In our current charged political and social climate, we who identify with the LGBTQ community are still condemned by many people, and like Korach in 1632, people even call for the earth to open its mouth and swallow us. This environment really had a significant impact on me psychologically and spiritually. I felt that I wasn't in the wilderness. Unironically, I lived in the deserts of Arizona at the time. All of this provides a useful entree into a little deeper dive into this parsha. Although Parshat Korach does not go into terribly great detail regarding Korach's complaints against Moshe, the Jewish sages did have their own thoughts. Bamidbar Rabbah, a medieval midrash on the book of Numbers, elaborates on Korach's critique of religious commandments, focusing on his rhetorical questions about tzitzit and mezuzot. The commentary expounds on the opening words of the portion, Korach took, saying that it relates to the fringes of the talit. Korach rebels against the laws and asks if a completely blue garment still has to be tied with tzitzit when normally a talit only needs to have a single thread. He also asks if a house filled with Torah scrolls still needs to be mezuzah, since every scroll in the house already contains the words of the mezuzah. As discussed in the Midrash, Korach was being a little overly legalistic with Moshe as a way to undermine Moses and his authority. While these questions might seem very trivial, they point to something deeper. People can have a tendency to marginalize laws or people they don't agree with or relate to. They may insist on the rightness of their position, not for the betterment of the community or the wellness of others, but for their own sake. Korach and his supporters seem to be pressing the case that they were correct to the overall detriment of the community. I've lost count of the number of times evangelicals would love to quote Torah against the LGBT community while completely ignoring what the Torah says about helping the stranger. As a transgender woman, I have faced the blowback regarding my identity. People love quoting Torah but forget what it says about showing compassion. There are places in the United States that I cannot visit for personal safety reasons. The pastor at my mom's church has deliberately misgendered me since I came out and began presenting fully as female. I'm definitely not feeling the love of Christ or even basic human dignity from him. My rejoinder to people like that is this. The Torah recognizes at least 4 genders, and the Talmud recognizes at least 6, maybe 8, depending on how you choose to parse it out. And actually, I know a Hasidic, former Hasidic rabbi who transitioned, had some issues with mom for that one. Even that long ago, our tradition recognized the complexity of identity. That's something the wider world still struggles with. We need to learn compassion from Korach, not in following his rebellion, but in avoiding the kind of rebellion that exists solely to tear others down or exclude them. We shouldn't use religion or rules as tools for exclusion or shame. We should not be like those who express Korach because he was a threat, but instead reflect on how we can avoid becoming people who send others into a wilderness of shame. Thankfully, the Reformed community has proven to be allies to the LGBTQ+ community. TB in particular has been amazing. From Cantor Safran and Rabbi Safar taking me under the wings for the first time I set foot in this congregation 7 years ago, to being welcomed into the sisterhood after completing my conversion. I actually started that down in Richmond. The sisterhood took me in even then. So the call that I want to make to everyone is this. How can you continue to be strong allies to the LGBTQ+ community and to other people who are oppressed? How can you help in bringing members of marginalized communities in from the wilderness? Shabbat Shalom.
Thank Elisheva, who was a wonderful student of text, for sharing those powerful and courageous words. It wasn't ideal that we picked this Shabbat to celebrate Pride, as I think Parashat Korach is probably the hardest portion to comment on, period. And Mira and I found only a few commentaries on Parashat Korach that related to Pride Month, and Elisheva found completely own connection. So thank you for that, Torah. So this evening, we wanted to be able to share a blessing for all that was written by one of our colleagues. Let's share this together as a community. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, who made us in your image, who knows no race nor gender, nor sexual identity or orientation. Blessed is the word pride, which is the consciousness of one's own dignity, to see oneself as completely whole and living as they were created to be. Blessed is joy and pleasure in the physical, spiritual, and emotional connection we feel in relationship to another. Blessed is knowing and being and celebrating. Blessed is allyship, truly seeing someone just as they are and how they want to be seen. Blessed is the ability to transform, to allow for movement and possibility, to create and recreate, and into the future to know that the possibilities are endless. Blessed are you, Adonai, who made us in your image.
If you're able, please rise these words of hope for a brighter future, the words of Elena.